Hi, guys, welcome back to Love, Sex, and Magic. Today's guest is the international speaker, best-selling author, and mother, Kate Northrup. She wrote the two best-selling books, Money, a Love Story, and Do Less, which is exactly what we're talking about today. Kate, it is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, you are the author of two absolutely brilliant books, both of which I have devoured, and both of which completely transformed my perspective on two different topics. So, thank you for your work. I want to talk to you about Do Less today.
Right.
So I read this book at the perfect time in my life. It was last year, and I was having that kind of realization that I think all female entrepreneurs have at some point, which is hustling and doing it all and adding more and more and more and more to my plate is not the best way to live. It's not the best conservation practice for my energy. And so this book came into my life, and it just felt like a massive permission slip. And there was one particular quote that really stood out, which I'm going to read, which was, "No one is checking to see how much we got done when we die. There's no parade. There's not going to be an award ceremony or a big check to cash for the person who did the most." I just love this. So I would love to hear what your journey of coming to this realization was like.
Yes. Well, I just want to say that I am very much still on this journey. Like, I am the kind of person who writes about the things that I need to know, and I learn them through teaching them and writing about them and walking the path next to others. But I learned about this mostly through becoming a mother, because prior to that time, I only ever had, like, a real job ever for 4 months, and so prior to
Mhm.
that time, I've always been an entrepreneur, and I had always just had total control over my time, so I could work all weekend. I could stay up until
Mm.
11, but then I could, like, recoup later. So because I had such profound freedom, I never really needed to pay attention to the way I was using my time and energy, because I always could just sort of, like, get myself reorganized whenever I needed to on my own time.
Mm.
However, when I got pregnant for the first time, I was so exhausted, like a level at which I had never experienced, and I still have never experienced that level of profound exhaustion that I had during that first pregnancy. Even now, having been pregnant a second time with a toddler and a really sick husband, I still wasn't like as tired as I was that first time. And having always been a very capable person, I am physically strong. I'm also really emotionally resilient, and so it was the first time in my life during that pregnancy and then the first year of motherhood, which was brutal. It was just, it sucked for so many reasons. Like, I had a traumatic birth, and then I had postpartum anxiety, postpartum insomnia. My baby was sick. There were just so many things. And it was the first time in my life that I hadn't been able to overcome my limitations through pushing harder or being strong. Like,
Mm.
those my go-to strategies, just like I couldn't do more things, or yeah, it was so wild. And so I just like I my whole identity shifted, and I realized I've been aiming the arrow of my life in the direction of, like, how many things can I get done? And and now I have profound limitations on how many things can I get done.
Mm.
And I've been basing my worth on that. And now that I have this baby, does that mean I'm less worthy, less valuable because I'm not getting as much done? Well, that couldn't be true. So then there
Mm.
must be something untrue about my belief system. And so that's really where I started to dive deeper into what I believed around time and my value, and what our society believes about time and the value of different kinds of work, and just how we have historically been pretty screwed up when it comes to how we value, what kinds of work and what kinds of work matters to us economically.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the resounding message that I have been receiving from your work is when you do less, it's actually so that you can be more. So it's not about becoming less, but I think we've been so accustomed to basing so much of our identity on how much we do that we think by doing less that it somehow takes away from us as individuals. Can you
Right.
speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, most of us, many of us, I'll just say myself, have been raised to believe that our job as humans is to check off the boxes of a series of accomplishments that make us more valuable in society. And I certainly followed that protocol. I did all this. I was a straight A student, went to an Ivy League school, did started a business when I was 18, like was really doing the thing. And it's wild to realize, like, so I think that for me, and this has helped others in our community, like living life from the other end of life has been really helpful to start to really look at, like, to sit with my granny who's 94, to read the book, the Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, to really like think about, what am I gonna wish I would have done in this moment when I'm 85?
Mm,
Because we're all dying, we're all dying. It's the one true thing. There are
yeah.
2 true things. One is that we're all dying, and 2 is that we all, while we're here, we all have a body.
Mhm.
And that's it. Everything else can be ripped away anytime.
Mm,
And so I just ask myself those questions, and I recommend other people ask the question, basically, like, given that I'm dying, how do I wanna live? And no one is lying on their deathbed wishing they had gotten more done. No one. No one ever has wished that. We wish for that we had connected more with people. We wish we had told people that we loved them. We wish we had been more present. We wish that we had given ourselves more permission to be our full selves rather than living according to other people's expectations.
mm.
And so I think I like to project out and then live backwards a little bit.
I love that. It's so, so true. And yeah, if you've ever spent any time with anyone on their deathbed, like I spent time with my father who passed away, and it is not about how much they got done. Definitely, it is all about relationships. It's about health. It's about being and living in the moment and doing the things that make you come alive, not about the ticking of all the boxes that we're so accustomed to doing. And I think, as someone who has identified in the past as a high achiever and kind of prided myself on that title, I think for many of us that feel the same, the idea of doing less can be a little bit triggering for people, because it's like, wait a minute, Kate, are you telling me to be lazy? Are you telling me to let myself go? Like, and then all these other thoughts come up. Well, it's okay for you to say that. Well, what about people that can't do less? Like, what does that mean? So what would be your response to that?
I love all of this because it's all so valid. And these are also thoughts that I have on a regular
Yeah,
basis, because I'm
right.
like, when I sit down to plan my week, I'm like, wow, I've got a lot going on. And I know I talk about doing less and like, but
Mm,
I can't do less because I have to pay the mortgage, but I can't do less because I have the team to pay, but I can't do less because I have to feed my kids, you know, blah, 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 right? So
mhm,
here's what I've found. I have found it's not about doing less of everything. Okay. Because I think that, so and here's what happens. There's 2 things. One, people read the title of my book and they're like, well, I can't do nothing. I have to da, 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 da. I'm like, no, no, my book's not called Do Nothing. So it's really interesting just to hear how less becomes nothing, because we really
Yeah.
are, as humans, we have a major tendency to do a 1 or a 10. We're very concrete in our thinking,
Mm,
and I think especially right now, we really need to be leaning into the spectrum and
Mm.
the holding of both and all the shades of gray,
Yeah.
because nothing is all one way or all then another way, and the more that we can see the depths of the layers of all the things that can be true at the same time, the better.
Mm.
So that's
Mm.
one. But it's also to do less of the things that don't matter so you can do more of the things that do matter. And so, for example, a timely example right now is like we have, we're really in the middle of the biggest civil rights movement in history here in the United States. And I know
Yeah.
it's global. Obviously, I don't know, how that's affecting the UK and where
Mm.
your community primarily is because I don't live there. But I know that it is rippling out. So in this moment, it's like do less does not apply to your anti-racism work. Do less does not apply to your, racial healing work, if that's the work
Mm.
you've committed yourself to doing, whether you're a Black woman, whether you're a person of color, a white woman. However, because I'm not saying like, right, somebody could very easily be like, well, you're saying do less. Or you saying like, just like take a nap all day as a privileged white woman? Is that your anti-racism plan? No, actually. But I'm so glad I have to do less tools
Mm.
because doing less of the stuff that doesn't matter, like something so micro, right? As here's an example I like to use from our business. We used to spend all this time and energy making these uh, branded social media graphics for
Mhm.
various reasons, for various things. And they just didn't perform. Like the metrics just weren't there. And it took all this time and energy and money to get it done. And like it just didn't perform. So that's one minor thing that actually saves us a lot of time and energy in our team and money. So we're doing less
Mm.
of that, doing less of trying to look perfect. So we
Mm.
can do more, listening, learning, all of the things that we're completely engaged in and committed to. So that's just, I mean, that's
Mm.
an example that's very timely. So it's doing less of what doesn't matter so you can do more of what does matter. And really, that's a person to person thing and it's a season to season thing. Because I know for me, when I was nursing, for example, when I was nursing a newborn, it was like, I need to really do less of being out in the world and do less of trying to have a perfect home and do less of all these different things, do less of reading the news. Because what I was noticing is I'm very prone to getting mastitis. And for anyone who's listening who's had mastitis, it sucks. And so I knew for me, I needed to do less of those things so I could do more feeding my baby because that was like a
Mm.
season. So I was all in on that and knowing that, like, that was gonna be over and then I could do less of something else to do more of a different thing.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for touching on all of the things that you just did. It's so valid and so important that we recognize that everyone's in a completely different situation, and the do less principles can apply to everyone, not just business owners, not just people that have a team, and not just mums, but everyone. So yeah, maybe like for people that are not entrepreneurs, for maybe for mums that are listening, how can they start to outsource and better resource their time so that they're
Mhm,
not feeling like it's up to them to do absolutely everything right now?
mhm. Oh my gosh, okay. I just feel this one so deeply. Having just come through having 3.5 months or 3 months with no childcare, um, running our company, and I have a 2-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, so I just, like, this is very intimate to me. And the knee jerk reaction for us as women, because we've been indoctrinated to believe that our purpose is to serve, is to think. I literally heard myself saying to my 4.5-year-old last night, because she wanted me to color with her instead of make dinner, which was very sweet. But I was like, I said to her, well, she was, well, why, mama? And I said, because if I don't make dinner, dinner won't be made. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I was like, that's super not true. Like,
Mm.
and so Now, it might be true in certain situations, right? You may not have a partner, you may not have children who could participate, whatever. But like, we number one step is to question everything that we think
Mm,
and question everything that we say and question everything that we assume. Because 9 times out of 10, there actually is somebody or a system or a software or a website or a something that we could lean on, but we're so wrapped up in a self identity of being able to do everything by ourselves that
mm,
we are making ourselves exhausted for no reason. Because the other thing is, so we have this belief, right? The more check boxes of achievement that I check off, the better I am as a human, the more valuable I am. So the corollary of that that's highly problematic is that means if I ask for help in checking any of those boxes and I have not done it myself, that means I am not worthy. And that means I am less lovable, right? That's
mm.
sort of like the bedrock there. And so here I am chopping vegetables, saying to my 4.5-year-old, well, if I don't make dinner, dinner doesn't get made. Like, who? Like, what martyr poltergeist just got me? And so that's really like, that's the question is,
Mm,
what assumption am I living into right now? Whose belief system is this? And am I choosing to carry it on or not? And if I'm choosing, and if I'm saying I am choosing to make dinner because this is a conscious choice that I'm making, great.
mm,
Then I can
mm.
chop those vegetables with love and I can really be there for that moment. But if I am making dinner out of obligation and a sense of martyrdom, then
Mm.
that's like going into my kids' food. It's then it's going into my body. Then
Yeah.
I'm raising 2 daughters who also think it's their job to serve everyone. So
Mm.
it's really like questioning at every juncture, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? What do I believe is true right now? And what if it weren't true? What if something else
Yeah.
were true? And
I
I think
love
that's
that.
where the work of Byron Katie comes in. It's so powerful.
Mm.
Asking, is this true? How do I absolutely know this is true? And you can, I'm sure you can link to Byron Katie if folks don't know her work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I will. Thanks for that. And yeah, I think you're so right. When it all depends on like the energy that we're doing something from. And if it's coming from a place of resentment, then it just breeds more and more resentment. And that just is just a killer for all of our relationships.
And like what
Um,
so like that also buys into this idea that our job as women is to serve and that our well-being doesn't matter. Like if the people around us are happy and fed, but we're falling on the ground because we're so depleted, that's like the picture of perfect womanhood. It's really sick.
yeah,
It's
it's true.
really, really sick. And even though it's not 1950, like a lot of us are still behaving that way. And yes, we need to look at the government, and yes, we need to look at corporations, and yes, we need to look at cultural
Mm,
change, but the culture changes with us. We
mm.
are the culture. We get to change it. So you got to just like change it in your kitchen and then it ripples out.
Yes. Yes. It's not about being the one that suffers the most. No one gets a prize for suffering the
No,
most.
no one knows. Now, I will say that many religions and many belief systems actually have taught us that you suffering, the whole concept of martyr is somebody who suffered the most and then is celebrated after their death for, eons.
Mm,
That's fine if that's your religious belief. It's not mine. I'm just choosing that that's not true because none of us actually knows. And if you
yeah.
think you know, you don't. No one knows what happens after we die.
Yeah.
No one knows. And so why not live?
One of the things that I've incorporated into my life since reading Do Less and incorporating these practices is I've started reading in the middle of the day, which is something that I
Mm.
never used to give myself permission to do. And so I would be collecting all of these books, buying all these books, and they would be on the shelf, and I wouldn't get around to reading them because I'd be like, well, I don't have the time. And one of the things I decided to do when I read Do Less was I started to read it in the middle of the day. And it was uncomfortable AF for me because there was all these voices in my head. You need to be checking Slack, you need to be checking your messages, you need to be checking your emails. What if someone needs you? You've got so much to do. And I said to myself, actually, this is just as important as all the work that I've set aside for today. This is just as important because if I can't show up in my fullness, if I can't give to myself, I'm going to be showing up from this depleted, half full space. And that's a practice that I've kept in my life. So now I'll take breaks in the middle of the day to sit and read. I'll take breaks for lunch. I'll take breaks just to take a rest break, which is something that I never would give myself permission to do before. So I think if anyone's listening and they're like, I couldn't possibly do that, just sit through the discomfort
Yes.
and, making space for that self-care, taking a bath in the middle of the day if you work from home, taking the time to actually make yourself a nice lunch and actually give yourself a proper lunch break instead of just eating at the laptop is feels so indulgent for some reason. But it doesn't have to be. It can be a new practice that we all have.
Yeah, and I think these things can be layered, right? Like for somebody
Mm,
listening, it might be revolutionary to go pee at the first sign of needing to go pee instead of, like, working for another hour while holding it because somehow the 3-minute pee break is gonna like, we do crazy shit, right?
wow.
So maybe for you today, the revolution is getting up
Mm,
to pee when you have to pee the first time you think of it.
mhm,
Maybe the revolution is going out and standing barefoot on the earth for 5 minutes. Like, it doesn't have to be an overhaul of your life, and that's why I set up the book
mhm,
with experiments that are small things, because the small things make the biggest change, and I know for me, I've been prioritizing in a crazy way, workouts during, the stay-at-home situation with no childcare, and to be honest, I was still grappling with the, "I don't have time," right? I don't have time to
mm,
move my body every day, and once
mm.
the kids were home and I was like, "I don't know what's gonna happen with our business. I don't know what's going on with the world. I'm just gonna exercise. I'm just gonna be in my body
Yeah.
because, like, that's the only thing I know that is certain, is that I
Mm,
live here in this body." And what's been amazing and what I really wanna say to those listening who are doubting that, like, with the reading in the middle of the day or the bubble bath right in the middle of the day, I just add the bubbles, or this whatever it is, right? It is mind blowing how I worked dramatically less in April and May
mm,
and prioritized my body's well-being, and our
mhm,
revenue was at record highs.
mm,
And I don't know what your experience, Mel, has been, but there is this odd inverse relationship to the amount I stress about my work and the amount of revenue and impact we create.
yeah.
And my coach, Raw Goddess, who is just the dream of all dreams, she gave me a mantra last summer, which is, the more I relax, the more money I make. The
Mm,
more I relax, the bigger the moves. And
mm,
so you don't have to be an entrepreneur for that to, for that to apply, right? Like the more I relax, the better my marriage is. The more I relax, the happier my kids are. The more I relax, the more my body heals. The
mm,
more I relax, the better my relationship with my mother is. Like it's just it works in every area, and it's we think that like the amount we stress out about something and the amount of effort we put in and the worry somehow improves the outcome, and it never does.
mm-mm. Yeah, I've had the exact same experience, and it's actually mind-boggling. And you think this can't be right. this this cannot possibly be true. But it really is. And I feel like it's something to do with us changing our state and
Mhm.
changing what we are a match for,
Yes.
really. Because when we are stressed and frazzled and burned out, what are we attracting? Like, what are we saying yes to by being in that state, really? And yeah, I love everything that you've shared about in Do Less, the feminine approach to doing business, which is different than what we've all learned. And it all has to do with listening and being in tune with our bodies as women and our cycles. Can you explain more about this? Because it's something that I've been experimenting with, launching things in, like, it's something that I had no idea about before. Now I'm planning launches around the ovulation time rather than trying to be on screen and do speaking things when I'm in the middle of my menstruation. So
Yeah.
please tell us all about this.
Well, so I want to preface this by saying this applies to you whether you menstruate or not, and I'll tell you
Mhm.
why. This also applies to you, well, really, yeah, that's it. So, because a lot of times when I start talking about periods, people who don't have periods check out. And there's a lot of reasons why you might not have a period, and I don't need to get into that. So what's so cool is our bodies have these 4 hormonal phases that we go through every month pretty predictably. Now, those 4 phases are mirrored by, or perhaps our bodies are mirroring much more likely, the 4 phases of the moon and the 4 seasons here on planet Earth. Now, you also see these 4 phases in the life cycle of a human. You see
Mhm.
these 4 phases when it comes to looking at pregnancy and the 4 trimesters, counting that the 4th trimester is actually that continuation of the pregnancy, even though the baby's technically on the outside. It's
Mm.
everywhere. Once you start
Wow.
to look, it's everywhere. And it's so cool because it gives us this like primal guidance for how to live that is based in how our bodies were formed and also, the forces at play that are creating gravity and rain and, snow and trees flowering. Like it's just so awesome. So the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, I'll just go through and I'll tell you kind of the energetic phases that they line up with the moon and the seasons. But the whole idea here is not to get out your protractor and try to organize your life perfectly according to the phases. I am somebody, I wish that I had a ridiculously regular cycle and I knew every month the exact day my cycle was going to come. I am not. I'm a very energetically ebby flow person. So if
Mm.
there's intensity in the world, like things change. I got my period last week 5 days early. It just so I
Mm.
can't I'm saying this because I cannot perfectly organize my life according to this, but I will tell you how I use it anyway.
Can I
Um,
just say, bizarrely, I also got my period last week, 5 days early.
did you get it
What's
on
going
Monday?
on there? I got it on
What
Sunday.
On Sunday. See, several of my friends and my sister also, you know what? I'm going to ask in my community how many
Yeah.
people got their period last week early because the intensity of
Yeah.
what was happening in the world, I just feel like there's something that happens with us
Mm.
women that we just sometimes start to bleed.
Yeah.
Um, so, well, and I'll tell you why I think that is in case you're just like, what are you talking about? The phases, and this is the perfect segue for talking about the phases. So the phase when you have your period is called the menstrual phase. Some people get confused because the whole thing is called the menstrual cycle, but within the menstrual cycle, there's a menstrual phase. And the menstrual phase is when you are bleeding. What's so cool though is during this time, it's the time when your brain, the left and the right hemispheres are the most interconnected and you have the most access to your intuition. So
Mm.
you feel the most inward, like you do not want to be like with the world. I know for me, I really have trouble thinking and talking, especially on the first and second day of my period. I'm super nonverbal and I cannot focus to save my life because there's so much going on internally that my brain and body will not allow me to engage externally,
Mm.
really, to a large extent. And so I think that in the intensity that was happening last week, as the protests erupted and there were so many demonstrations and a large awakening globally, perhaps some of us went into that place of inward so that we could access, the guidance that was there for how we needed to respond and show up.
Mm.
I know for me that was what was going on.
Yeah.
So that phase is a really good time to rest and reflect and go within. It's a great time to journal. It's a great time to think through problems, think through questions, see what comes up inside. I have friends like they'll call me, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I la 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 la? And I say, what day of your cycle are you on? And is it possible to wait to make that decision until day one when you bleed?
Mm.
And if you can, you're just gonna save yourself a lot of time and angst. And, like, 9 times out of 10, they call me back and they're like, "Yep, I waited, and, like, within 10 minutes of getting my period, I knew exactly what to do."
So true.
Yeah, right? So it just like everything just sort of is like um
Yeah.
so that phase is the same as the energy of a new moon. So if you are not having a unmedicated, relatively regular menstrual cycle, follow the moon. It's the same. It's a little more
Mm.
subtle, right? Because you're not bleeding. But if you pay attention, if you get a lunar calendar is or look in the sky, like it's pretty obvious what's going on with the moon, and that is affecting us at all times as well. So then the next phase after that is the follicular phase. The follicular phase is the about 6 days after your period stops. And this time is a time of new beginnings. It's a springtime energy. It's the same energy as a waxing moon. It's a time of, I'm in my follicular phase right now. It's a time of brainstorming, planning, initiation. So
Mm.
there's I'm doing my whole new next phase of my 6 months editorial calendar today. I'm looking at my promotional plans. I'm getting things in Google Calendar. Like I'm just laying it out. That's what I'm doing this week because that's what I feel like doing. At the end of
Mm.
the day, like I'm saying a lot of things. What I'm basically saying is do the thing you feel like doing and stop trying to make yourself do things you don't feel like doing because we're organized so that at one point in the month, we feel like doing all the things we need to do. If we would just organize ourselves to do the thing we feel like doing when we feel like doing it, we'll do it better. We won't need as
Mm.
much energy to do it. We won't have nearly as much friction, and then we'll have way more time and energy left over to do the other things at the other time when we feel like doing them. I mean, that's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, so then the next phase is ovulation, same energy as full moon and summertime. This is our
Mm.
time of peak fertility, literally, but also energetically. So it's a time when we are the most open to cross pollination. It's a really verbal time. It's a great time for connecting. It's a great time for outreach. It's a great time for batching podcast interviews. It's a great time for date night, having a party, whatever, right? So those outward sorts of things.
Mm.
And then the next phase is the luteal phase. It's the same energy as autumn and the waning moon. And so this is the time where we turn within again. So there are two phases, follicular and ovulation, or waxing moon and full moon energy that are outward, summer, spring. And then there are two phases, luteal and menstrual, autumn, winter, waning moon, new moon, that are inward. Now, our culture really overly celebrates outward, masculine
Mm.
energy, getting things done, things that are visible, um, achievement, forward momentum, point A
Mhm.
to point B. But half of the day, half of the year, and half of the month, we are experiencing a different kind of energy that is equally valuable and equally useful. So, the luteal energy, it's the 10 to 12 days before you get your period. If you have a hormonal imbalance, you may experience PMS during this time. That is not normal. You don't have to have that happen. And I really recommend checking out Nicole Jardim's book, Fix Your Period, if you're struggling around that.
Mm.
Um, However, all of us do have a highly tuned negativity filter at that time. So if there was everything that's not working in your life is going to feel louder
Ooh.
leading up to your period.
That is,
So
I'm glad you said that because that is the time, that is always the time in my month where I am the most prone to being triggered, and I will say things that are mean. That are truthful, but I could have at a different point in my cycle, I could
Yeah.
have presented it in a kinder way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is like it's really when the truth hits us between the eyeballs, and when
Mhm.
we don't have the filter that we might during the rest of the month. And
Mhm.
as my dear friend Deb Kern told me when I was postpartum with my first daughter and I was losing my mind, which PS, the 4th trimester postpartum period is like the autumn and luteal phase
Oh.
pregnancy journey. So, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, PMS, seasonal affective disorder, these are all the same flavor of energy. There's a lot of grief, there's a lot of mourning, there's a lot of discomfort. And she said to me when I called her in an SOS, she was like, "Honey, you can trust your feelings, you just can't trust the volume of them." Oh, okay, because there's so much that
Yeah.
our culture does around invalidating women and being like,
Mm.
"Oh, well, you're just PMSing," or, "Oh, it's just your hormones." Yes, your hormones are dropping fertilizer on the truth, right? They're
Mm.
turning up the dial on the truth, so you just feel it more strongly. But your luteal phase is not the best time to make decisions about those truths. It's the best time to just notice them and
Yeah.
then take them into your bleed or take them into the new moon to really go within and then say, "Okay, well, what do I need to do about this when I'm I'm emerging from my
Mm.
menstruation and I'm starting out again in follicular
Yeah.
sort of springtime energy." So that's
Right.
it. Every phase has a purpose. Every phase is incredibly valuable. And when you begin to know where you are, there's so much energy saved from not beating yourself up anymore. It's really profound. You just be like, "Oh, this is the phase I'm in. This is what I'm experiencing. It's right. And
Mm.
here's how I can use it." As opposed to the bullshit which we say, which is like, "Oh, I feel like myself this half of the month, and then I don't feel like myself." No, no, no.
Mm.
It's all us.
Yeah.
Like we are ourselves. It's just our culture only celebrates half of it. But
Yeah.
we need to celebrate the other half and own its value as well.
I love that. It's so important. And I think for any women that are not tracking their cycle, that have not kind of got in tune with their body in that way, it can feel like you're just crazy sometimes in the month. It can feel like, why don't I have any energy today? Why do I feel so crazy today? And you can start putting these labels on yourself and beating yourself up without really understanding this is normal. You're just in this phase of your cycle. And I think when you start to actually get into that rhythm and realize, oh, this is the phase when I feel more like this is the phase where I feel more inward, it's like this massive like permission slip to just be, and this like kind of forgiveness of this, like this acceptance of this is my body, this is what she's doing right now, and can I just accept it and be with it, and then in a few weeks then I'll have the energy to do this kind of thing instead.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's really here's what's so cool. When we accept what we're experiencing and use it,
Mhm.
this is especially for people who are raising their eyebrows at this whole conversation.
We know yours. We know there's
Yeah,
some of you.
I was that person. When I first heard about this, I was like, "Yeah, that's totally for other people. Like, I'm too busy."
Mhm.
Basically, I was like, "I'm too busy. I have too much to do. I couldn't possibly." But here's what's so cool. When as I've started implementing this over the last 4 years. And during this time, my business has grown and grown and grown, and the impact has grown and grown and grown, and I have not worked more and more and more because
Mm.
when we honor all the phases, then the phases that are more outwardly productive get even more outwardly productive because we've honored ourselves with the rest and internal aspects that are also needed to bolster forward momentum. So you end up it's kind of like a slingshot, right? Like the more you honor the inward phases, the further and faster you will go in the outward phases.
Oh, I think I've just figured out what you've done. You've created like the ultimate high achiever hack for actually more achievement whilst doing less.
Whilst doing less, because in our culture, like, we have to meet ourselves where we are, and where we are
Mm,
is having been brainwashed to believe that the more we do, the more valuable we are. So if
mm.
that's the reason that you start doing this, great. And then you'll realize there are so many other benefits, but I just want people to start, and if I need to tell you that it's gonna make you more productive, which PS it will, that's great.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Kate. This has been such an incredible conversation. I feel as though there's been so many women listening that this will have been like a light bulb moment for them to go, do you know what? I'm going to actually give myself permission to not add a million things to my to do list today and actually just, honor myself for where I am.
Yeah.
So thank you. Where can everyone come and hang out with you and work with you and find you?
Yeah. So, katenorthrup.com is the best place. I have, if you want to know how to operationalize these tools and start to plan using them, I have a free do less weekly planning ritual that you can download there. At katenorthrup.com. And then I work with people in Origin, my membership for people who identify as female who are entrepreneurs who want to use these tools to grow their business while doing less. And that's over at origincollective.com.
Amazing. We're going to link all of that up in the show notes. So now we're going to head over to my membership, The Collective, and just answer a couple more questions from our members. But Kate, this has just been wonderful. I feel so much more relaxed just from having this conversation with you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey guys, I hope you loved this episode. If you did, make sure you hit subscribe and leave us a comment with your best and biggest takeaway from this episode. I'll see you soon.